My parents warned me they'd increase my rent if I didn't become my sister's unpaid babysitter. They had no idea I'd disappear overnight, leaving them to deal with the fallout. I'm just an ordinary 25-year-old who worked tirelessly to finish college and secure my first job as an elementary school teacher. It's not a lucrative career, but I adore working with children, so it's fulfilling. Still, finances are tight, especially when you're just starting out. That's why I've been staying with my parents in the same suburban home where I grew up. It's not the most thrilling arrangement, but it's practical. They charge me rent, what my dad calls a fair amount. I also cover my own groceries and pitch in with household tasks like cutting the grass, fixing things around the house, and even tackling the garage cleanup last summer when Dad injured his back. It's not glamorous, but it's temporary. My goal was to stay for a couple of years, save up, and then get my own place. Straightforward, right? That was the plan until my older sister Melissa came back into the picture. Melissa is 32 and, to put it delicately, she's never been the responsible type. Growing up, she was the favorite. I'm not sure if it's because she's the eldest or if our parents just have a soft spot for her, but she could never do wrong in their eyes. She dropped out of college twice, first because she wasn't motivated, and then because the professors were too strict. She's never kept a job for more than a few months. Whenever things didn't go her way, she'd quit, always with an excuse about how it wasn't her fault. Our parents always came to her rescue.
Behind on rent?
They'd cover it. Car trouble? They'd pay for repairs.
Speeding ticket?
Mom would write the check while grumbling about how the police unfairly target young women. Meanwhile, I was working at a cafe, cleaning tables to save for college and taking out loans to pay for tuition. Melissa had been living independently for the past couple of years. Or so I thought. Turns out, she'd been drifting between apartments, always late on rent, and relying on our parents to keep her afloat. I didn't know the full extent of this until she showed up one day and casually announced she was pregnant. I'm not one to judge people's choices, but Melissa wasn't exactly in a stable position. The baby's father was a guy she'd been dating for a few months, and from what I gathered, he disappeared as soon as she shared the news. You'd think this would be the moment Melissa realized she needed to get her act together. But instead, she ran straight to Mom and Dad, who immediately jumped into action to fix everything. Within days, they started transforming the basement into a small apartment for her, complete with a kitchenette. I didn't ask where the money was coming from, but I overheard Mom mention tapping into their retirement savings. I tried to stay out of it. If they wanted to pour money into Melissa's problems, that was their decision. But I could sense trouble brewing. My parents have a habit of pulling everyone into Melissa's messes. It's like they believe the whole family has to rally around her, no matter how much chaos she causes. At first, I convinced myself it wouldn't affect me. Melissa would have her own space in the basement, and I'd keep living my life. Yes, it was frustrating to see them go all out for her again, but I tried not to let it bother me. That approach worked for about 2 months. Then, small things started adding up. Mom began dropping hints about how I should spend more time with Melissa since she was going through so much. This was despite me working full-time and coming home exhausted most days. Then came the subtle guilt trips. "Melissa's all alone right now," Mom would say, staring at me pointedly, as if I was supposed to fix her problems. "Being pregnant and single is so tough." Dad wasn't any better. He'd bring up Melissa in every conversation. "You should be thankful for what you have, Sarah," he'd say over dinner, passing the mashed potatoes. "Not everyone's as fortunate as you." Fortunate? I was barely getting by, trying to build a career and save money. Meanwhile, Melissa was getting a fully renovated apartment handed to her, along with endless support. But things escalated when I overheard Mom and Dad talking one night. I was in the kitchen making tea, and they were in the living room. "She's going to need a lot of support once the baby arrives," Mom said. "Of course," Dad replied. "We'll all chip in." "All?" Mom asked. "You, me, and Sarah," Dad said, as if it was a given. I nearly dropped my cup. They hadn't mentioned any of this to me, but it was clear they'd already decided I was part of their plan. That's when I started feeling uneasy. I didn't know the details yet, but I could tell they were cooking up something that would drag me into Melissa's drama, whether I wanted it or not. My unease grew as Melissa started coming over more often. She'd lounge on the couch, complaining about how tough pregnancy was and how unfair it was that her ex had left. She'd make snide remarks about how lucky I was to have a steady job and no kids to worry about. I held my tongue to avoid a fight, but in my mind I kept thinking, why does this always fall on me? By the time we sat down for dinner that night, I had a sinking feeling something was coming. I didn't know what, but I knew it wouldn't be good. Dinner felt off, like everyone was in on a secret I didn't know. Mom and Dad were making small talk about the neighbor's new deck, and Melissa was glued to her phone. It seemed forced, like they were waiting for the perfect moment to drop something. We were eating lasagna, Dad's go-to for serious family discussions. I don't know why he thinks lasagna softens bad news. I tried to focus on my plate, but halfway through, Mom cleared her throat. So we've been thinking, she began, glancing at Dad. I tensed up. Those words never led to anything good. With Melissa moving back in, she's going to need some support, Mom continued, her voice overly gentle. Support with what? I asked, keeping my tone even. Dad jumped in. With the baby, obviously. Melissa's got a lot on her plate, and it's going to be tough for her to handle everything alone. I glanced at Melissa, who was still scrolling on her phone, acting like the conversation didn't involve her. Okay, but what does that have to do with me? I asked, setting my fork down. Mom and Dad exchanged a look, like they were figuring out how to phrase their next move. Well, Mom started, you're already here, and you're great with kids, being a teacher. We thought it made sense for you to help with babysitting. Help? I echoed, raising an eyebrow. Dad nodded eagerly. Yeah, just watch the baby while Melissa gets settled. It wouldn't be full-time, just when you're around. I stared at them, trying to wrap my head around what they were asking. They weren't just asking for a favor, they were expecting me to take on a second job for free. You want me to babysit a newborn after teaching all day? I asked. Well, you're home by 3 most days, Mom pointed out. And you're not paying full market rent, Dad added, as if that justified it. I couldn't believe my ears. You're asking me to come home from a full day of work and take care of Melissa's baby? Mom sighed, like I was being difficult. It's not like that, Sarah. We're all going to help out. Oh. I repeated. Yes, Dad said. We're family, and family supports each other. At that point, Melissa finally looked up from her phone. Wow, Sarah, she said with a smirk. I didn't realize helping your sister was such a big deal. My hands clenched under the table. Her entitlement was infuriating. It's not about that, I said. I have my own life, my own job. I can't just drop everything to babysit. You're being selfish, Mom snapped. Melissa's struggling, and the least you can do is help. Why is it my job to fix her choices? I shot back, my voice rising despite myself.
She's 32, no taquis ni mort.
Melissa gave me an exaggerated eye roll. Enough, Dad said firmly. We're all in this together, whether you like it or not. You're living in our house, and we expect you to contribute. Contribute. I said. I pay rent, buy my own food, and do chores. How is that not enough? The room went quiet, the tension thick. Melissa sat there, smirking, like she'd already won. Well, Mom finally said, if you're not willing to help, maybe we need to reconsider your living situation. My stomach sank. Are you threatening to kick me out? No, Mom said quickly. But if you're not going to contribute more, we might need to talk about raising your rent. I couldn't believe it. I'd done everything to be a responsible tenant, and now they were using my rent to pressure me into babysitting.
You're serious.
I asked, my voice trembling. You're going to punish me for not being Melissa's free nanny? It's not punishment, Dad said. It's about being part of the family. Family. I stood up. This is about you enabling Melissa, like always, and trying to drag me into it. Don't talk about your sister like that, Mom snapped. I'm done, I said, heading for the stairs. Help Melissa if you want, but leave me out of it. I stormed to my room and slammed the door, my heart racing. I couldn't believe how far they'd gone. I'd always known they favored Melissa, but this was a new low. It felt like they wanted to control me, keeping me under their roof to manipulate me into doing their bidding. Melissa's smugness during the whole thing made it worse. She just sat there, scrolling, like it wasn't her problem. I barely slept that night, replaying the conversation in my head, thinking of all the things I could have said. By morning, I was still furious but felt trapped. Moving out wasn't that simple. I was only a few months into my job, and rent in the area was steep. For the next few days, the house was tense. Mom and Dad were clearly upset, but instead of talking, they resorted to passive-aggressive jabs. "Must be nice to have so much free time," Mom said as I walked in one evening. "Yeah, some people don't have that luxury," Dad added, not looking up from his paper. I ignored them and went to my room. I didn't have the energy to argue. Melissa, meanwhile, was thriving. She hadn't officially moved in yet but was over constantly, taking over the living room with her belongings and acting like she owned the place. She'd leave her shoes by the couch, her bag on the table, and random items scattered around. One night, I came home to find her sprawled on the couch, eating ice cream and watching a reality show. She barely acknowledged me, just muttered a quick hey before returning to her screen. I waited for her to say something, an apology, a thank you, but nothing. I went to the kitchen and opened the fridge, only to find half my groceries missing. My bread? Gone. My yogurt? Gone. Even my leftovers from the previous night were missing. "Did you take my food?" I asked, walking back to the living room. Melissa didn't look up. "Mom said it was fine," she mumbled, spooning ice cream. "She didn't pay for it," I snapped. Melissa rolled her eyes. "Relax, Sarah, it's just food." "It's my food," I said, my voice rising. "If you want groceries, buy your own." "God, you're so dramatic," Melissa said, setting her bowl down. "It's not like I took your car." I was speechless, fuming, as she grabbed her phone and started texting, ignoring me again. I wanted to scream, to call out her selfishness, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Mom and Dad always let her get away with this. The next morning, Mom cornered me in the kitchen while I was making coffee. "You need to apologize to your sister," she said sternly. "For what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "For making her feel unwelcome," Mom said, arms crossed. "She's going through so much, and you're making it harder."
Are you kidding?
I said. "She ate my food and acted like it was nothing. How is that my fault?" Mom sighed, like I was the unreasonable one. "It's just food, Sarah. You can buy more." "That's not the point," I said, struggling to stay calm. "The point is she doesn't respect boundaries, and you're letting her."
Boundary.
Mom scoffed. "This is her home too. You need to learn to share." That's when I realized reasoning with her was pointless. She didn't care about my perspective, she just wanted me to do what was best for Melissa. Things got worse over the next week. Mom and Dad kept hinting they'd raise my rent if I didn't step up. Melissa started moving more of her stuff into the house, filling the basement with boxes and furniture. She even began using my bathroom because the one downstairs wasn't good enough. I tried to stay out of it, but it felt like they were determined to pull me into their mess. One evening, Dad called me into the living room with a spreadsheet in hand. "We need to talk," he said, motioning for me to sit. I sat cautiously on the couch, bracing myself. "We've been looking at the budget," Dad said, tapping the paper. "With Melissa moving in, costs are going up. We think it's fair for you to contribute more." "You're already charging me rent," I said. "How much more do you want?"
Dad shrugged.
"We're still figuring it out, but if you're not helping with the baby, this seems fair." I couldn't believe it. They were using my rent to force me into babysitting. "This is absurd," I said, standing. "I'm already paying enough for what I get here."
If you want me to leave, just say it.
"No one's asking you to leave," Dad said quickly. "We're asking you to do your part." "My part?" I repeated.
You mean Melissa Espar.
Dad opened his mouth to argue, but I walked out, slamming my bedroom door behind me. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, where my boundaries were ignored, and my parents saw me as free labor. I had to get out. The idea of leaving was one thing, but making it happen was another. I didn't have much saved, not enough for my own place. The thought of uprooting my life was daunting, but staying wasn't an option. If I let them push me into being Melissa's nanny now, it would never end. I didn't want to wake up 5 years from now, still in that house, miserable and resentful. The next morning, I sat down with my laptop and opened my budget spreadsheet. Rent, groceries, gas, student loans. I wasn't great at saving, but I had a little set aside. I calculated everything and realized I could swing a move if I found something affordable and cut back on extras. The timing was perfect. My coworker Emily had mentioned weeks earlier that she needed a roommate. I hadn't thought much of it then, but now it felt like a lifeline. I texted her, "Hey, is that roommate spot still open?" She replied instantly, "Yup, still looking. You interested?" "Maybe. Can we talk after work?" Emily's response was quick, "Sure thing." That afternoon, I met her in her classroom after school. She was grading papers at her desk. "What's up?" she asked, looking up. I hesitated, unsure how much to share. "I'm thinking of moving out of my parents' place," I said. "Things are getting complicated." Emily nodded, like she got it without needing details. "The offer's still open," she said. "It's a small place, but it's nice, and we'd split everything evenly. Rent's $800 a month, utilities included." It was a bit more than I'd hoped, but I could manage. "When would you need someone to move in?" I asked. "Yesterday," she laughed, then added, "but seriously, any time."
If you're in, the room est sûr.
I told her I'd let her know by the end of the week, but in my mind, I'd already decided. This was my way out. No. But I refused to get sucked back in. This was why I'd left, to escape the manipulation and drama. The next week at work, things got stranger. Mom showed up at school during my lunch break, crying and begging to talk. She was in full meltdown, claiming I'd ruined the family and that Melissa was falling apart without me. My principal had to intervene and ask her to leave, which was embarrassing. I spent the rest of the day avoiding my co-workers' glances, knowing they were curious about my family drama. But that incident actually helped. I'd told a few co-workers about the situation, and they stepped up. "Let us know when you're ready to get the rest of your stuff," Emily said, handing me her spare keys. "We'll make it quick." A few days later, Emily and another coworker, Lisa, came with me to my parents' house to grab some forgotten documents, my teaching certification, tax forms, and other work papers. I'd been so focused on leaving that I hadn't checked the drawer where I kept them. I thought I was prepared for whatever they might pull, but I underestimated them. When we got to my room, it was a mess. Melissa had taken over, mixing her stuff with mine like she was claiming the space. Clothes that weren't mine were stuffed in my dresser, baby items were piled on my desk, and my nightstand was filled with her things. "What's going on?" I muttered. Melissa appeared in the doorway, holding a mug and looking unfazed. "Oh hey," she said casually. "I guess some of my stuff got mixed up. It's hard to tell what's whose now." I stared at her, stunned by her nerve. "You mean the stuff in my room, where I've lived for years?" She shrugged, sipping her coffee. "You're already gone, so what's the big deal?" It was obvious she'd done this on purpose to make things harder. But I was ready. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder with photos of my room from before she moved in. "I've got pictures of everything," I said, showing her the screen. "And a list of all my stuff. Including serial numbers for my electronics." Melissa's face twisted in annoyance, but before she could respond, Mom and Dad showed up. "What's going on?" Dad demanded. "What are you doing here?" "I came for some documents I forgot," I said calmly. "But Melissa's claiming she can't tell what's hers and what's mine. Good thing I have documentation." Dad's face darkened. "If you take anything that's not yours, I'll call the police." I laughed coldly. "Go ahead. We can also discuss the legality of you entering my room without notice and messing with my stuff." That silenced him. Emily and Lisa helped me sort through the mess. Melissa tried to claim my laptop was hers, but I showed the receipt and serial number photo. The more she realized her plan wasn't working, the angrier she got. "This is so unfair," she yelled, throwing her hands up. "You're stealing from a pregnant woman." I turned to her, done holding back. "The only one trying to steal here is you," I said firmly. "Just like you've been trying to steal my time and freedom by expecting me to be your nanny. Not anymore." With that, I got into Emily's car and drove away, not looking back. That was 6 months ago.